And we are live. And a good morning to everybody who's joining us today. Welcome to Behind the Markets. It is the Thursday edition. This is Enterprise Thursday. And I'd like to take things a little bit different, Brother Vernon. How are you doing, my man?
I don't know what kind of different you want to take, but let's have it. I'm doing great. As handsome as I am. How are you?
Good, 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 my brother. Good. So I'm going to start with a word. In church we usually say, "I don't know who needs to hear this." You always post and start with, "I don't know who needs to hear this."
Yeah.
So I'm going to start by saying, "I don't know who needs to hear this, but I think
Mm.
someone does."
To do, or you wonder where it went. You either tell your money what to do, or you wonder where it went. Money flows from people who do not manage it to the people who do manage it.
And there's nothing more simple than that. And this is why I always say redistribution of wealth never really works, because all it ever does is pushes money. Like, you can just carve out money, give it to everyone, and then it comes back directly to the people who know how to manage it. Welcome, people, to Bear the Markets Thursday edition. It is the Enterprise Thursday. Let's get going. Now, in our market roundup today, Vernon, we have seen that the Kwacha has crossed over 20.056. This is back over where it was now for a couple of months ago. Up to the dollar is up 2.8%. 2.28% on the week and up 10.23% on the month, up 10.83% year to date, and it is in a buying posture. Stock exchange did not change yesterday. 1,188.89, up down 0.64% on the week, but up 11.64% on the month. Sorry, Vernon, I think we're getting a little bit of feedback. And then we're actually seeing that the bond index moved up by 0.1% yesterday, while it moved in the negative in dollars by 0.58%, mainly due to the exchange rate difference. I think we can all see that. While interest rates have started to come down again, down below the 24.12, and it's now around 24.11 points. 24.1171. As you can see, we've got a little bit of a boomerang happening with the FX rate heading back to where it was, bouncing back. You can see this has been a serious snapback, 2.8% just on the FX rate in 1 week. So it appears that the neutral rate is actually coming back, and I think this was an analysis done earlier in the year, which actually showed this movement back up to about 1920. But we are probably going to see if there is a debt deal coming anytime soon. This is a little bit of a waiting game going forward. We're also seeing a little bit of a boomerang also in the South African rand rate, which is up 2.01% yesterday, up 7% on the month. This is cross-border trader inflation waiting to happen. So the things that we expect to come in from South Africa are going to come in 7% more expensive, and the prices are probably going to get passed over from the cross-border traders directly to the people themselves. So this might be a bit of a tough season, as we can see. This might, especially those, like I said, those things that are coming in at the lower rungs of the economy, which are coming in from the, as I said, cross-border trade activity. Now we're also taking a look at also the bond index. As you can see, this is the upside down boomerang happening on the USD bond index. This is for Zambians who are investing abroad. Now, remember, if you're planning on retiring back in Zambia, and the baseline is that 97% of Zambians who live abroad still have their Zambian passports. So if you're planning on retiring in Zambia, your bond auctions, your bond indexes, sorry, the dollar-based bond index is not that bad. Now, I always tell Zambians abroad, as long as you have a Zambian passport, you must plan to come back to Zambia, because you're in another person's country and anything can happen to you. I say this as a child of an expatriate who lived in another country all his childhood. Trust me when I say this, things change. You must always plan for your return back to Zambia. Until you have changed your citizenship, do not expect to be staying in another country, no matter how lavish you may feel it may be. Be prepared for that return. So that's why look at your bond index in Kwacha until your passport has changed, or until your citizenship has changed. You can also see that the composite bond index has come down, but so it is starting to come down a bit, but it's also coming down off that little spike up that we saw earlier in the week. Now, crossing over into the commodity market, we are also taking a look before we get into our break. Crossing over into the commodity market, we do also see that that copper prices went up a little bit by 0.5%, while we're seeing that oil also went up by 0.17%, and gold went up by 0.13%. So slight movements, as everybody's wondering what the Federal Reserve's move is going to be this month. Looking into some of the charts as well, copper, we are starting to see one of the issues here is that copper prices, the copper inventory jumped to the highest it's been since November. So we're actually seeing LME inventories recovered amid fragile Chinese demand. So that's one of the things that we're actually starting to see that's actually pushed back up. So LME inventories are actually slightly starting to come back in terms of copper that's being held in the London Metals Exchange inventories. Now, other thing we're also seeing is that gold is also due for a movement down. There is a potential for gold to come back down to the $1,700 point. Remember that we keep gold not because of the fact that it's going to trade and give us a huge profit, but we keep gold because it's what we call wealth insurance in the event there is a negative downturn. And that's a little bit on the commodities market and the entrance of the market. We are seeing Kwacha is still moving in a negative direction. Bonds are still trundling along. The US dollar versions are still getting wiped out. The stock market has held a position above 8,000, and commodities are starting to recover, though it does seem like 8,000 for copper seems to be the baseline without any movement down. We'll be back on the other side of the break, where we will be coming back to come in and deal with our four horsemen, our wealth insurance assets, and getting into our deep dives and our topic of discussion, which is sales, the art of persuasion. So you all really want to come back to the art of persuasion. You don't want to miss that. See you all on the other side.
All right, we should be back at it.
Thank you very much, Vernon. Let's get back to where we were. To everyone, thank you very much, and welcome back to the other side of the show. Now, getting into wrong index, but getting into where we were, we're talking about the fact that gold is actually due for a trade downward, mainly due to technical indicators that are showing some weakness in it. And part of what we're seeing here is we're seeing that gold is trading the resistance point or the floor point, sorry, support point is actually way below the 100-day moving average. So there is an opportunity for gold to actually swing back down to about 1,700. So I think that's what anyone who's holding gold should actually consider themselves in that situation. But remember, gold opposes the market. So you hold it not because you want to earn everything off of it. You hold it because it's just an insurance policy against the rest of your wealth. That's why you diversify into certain things. Now, part of what we're seeing in terms of the wealth insurance assets back up in the market, we're seeing Bitcoin up 3.5% after the SEC has been actually filing lawsuit. We don't know what's happening, but it's actually causing a little bit of a push upwards. While we're also seeing Ethereum up 1.7% and gold up in Kwacha up 0.8%. So these are your wealth insurance assets as of yesterday. And this is the broad asset outlook in terms of the markets. Again, gold up 20% in Kwacha year to date. While you're seeing the US dollar up 10.8% in Kwacha year to date, stocks up 11.6%, bonds up 11.8%. Now, remember that inflation at the end of the year is expected to be somewhere around 10.4. So already halfway through the year, we are seeing some real gains that will probably push through to the end of the year. So this is looking like a relatively standard year, unless we see any major changes in the market. Now, remember, as I say to people, this part of the equation where you're seeing USD, gold, Bitcoin, Ethereum, do not liquidate all your bonds and stocks tomorrow and then decide that you're going to pump everything into US dollars, gold, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. I always tell people something. Remember this when you look at wealth insurance. Yes, Bitcoin is up 78% year to date, but it's also down 66% from its all-time highs in the middle of last year. So just remember, these are wildly volatile assets, people. So you really have to take into consideration what that might do to you if you decide that you want to try and get rich because you're chasing numbers. Because a lot of people make the mistake chasing numbers without assessing risk. Okay, always look at the risk and the possibility of losing money and balance your money according to that. That is the mistake everyone makes. When they're investing, they just chase the numbers. They forget to look at the risk, and that becomes the downside. Now, I know that there are two. On the flip side of the coin, don't just look at risk and never look at the growth opportunities. That is where problems come in as well. There are two sides to life, as Booker T. Washington says. Look more on the bright side of life, but always be conscious of the dark side of life. Now, here's some of here's how Four Horsemen, as they came out yesterday. We saw the South African forex reserves did decline. Brazilian inflation dropped to a 2.5-year low. Unfortunately, crude oil inventories did decline by 0.45. That was what pushed prices of crude up. US mortgages did drop slightly for the first time in a while UK 2-year gilts, in other words, their bonds were auctioning higher, while their mortgages also went up to 7.44%. Canadians surprised the world with a rate hike of 25 basis points, while Chinese bank lending rates went up by 0.2% to 3.4%, showing that interest is becoming a bit tighter even in Japan. U.S. consumer credit continued to rise. That's to $23 billion in May, by $23 billion in May 2023, while Swiss unemployment rose to 2%. Italian retail sales slowed down even more, and U.S. trade deficit deepened due to weaker exports. And on the industrial side, we saw German production grow, but slower than expected, while U.S. housing prices contracted and got into a deeper contraction, and the U.S. mortgage industry continued to show signs of slowing down. So again, we're seeing weak industrials, but we're seeing declining inflation around the world. And this is something that we will be getting to before we get into our deep dive. Let's get into our quick analysis for everyone here. This is, I'll be looking at the global food inflation and the global food inflation data as of the FAO and the World Bank data. We collect this every monthly basis. We did see that global food supply, in summary, we did see that global food and commodity inflation continues to be on the decline as supply chains globally regularize. Global food inflation deflated by 2.3% in May 2023. So remember that this is the food that we're importing. So the prices of things out there in the world actually come down by 2.3% just on the month. And this was led by oils, things like your cooking oil, down by 8.7%, and cereals down by 4.8%, respectively, in the month of May. However, food inflation did see some heat in sugar and meat prices, which rose 5.5% and 3%, respectively, in the month of May. It is the industrials, which are non-food related, that were pushing global deflation. Specifically, energy prices came down by 11.3%, and metal prices came down by 6.4%. That's not good for us as a country. Now, this is the food inflation position as of this is the food inflation position as of May, and this is the monthly inflation. The light one, sorry, is April. I think we just got blocked out there. But as you can see, meat prices up 3%, up from where they were at 1.3%. Sugar prices rose by 17% last month, but came down to 5.5%. Beverages are now down, which is your teas and coffees. They're down to about they're negative 1.4. Everything else, including fertilizer prices, are also down. So you can see dairy prices, cereals, oils, fertilizers, beverages all came down. And even items such as rubber, it's only gone up slightly, but cotton down, tobacco is slightly up, and timber is down. So you can see that there's not as much global inflation out there. So we're not going to be importing as much inflation. It's just our FX rate, which is the risk. Now, if you're looking at year-on-year global inflation, here's how it is. Oils are down 48% than where they were. So you can see that they're half the price that they were in the highs that we were dealing with, because we're dealing with sunflower oil and those prices as well. Sugar is up 30.9% over the year, while dairy prices are down 17%, cereals are down 25%, fertilizer is also down 31%. Remember, at one point it was $250. It's now down to $150. So we're actually starting to see prices actually coming down drastically in some areas. Cotton down 42%. So these things were all at all-time highs last year. So they've come down extremely off the highs as supply chains have regularized. And as you can see, this has been the chart of inflation. Energy prices have been the one that's wobbling. It went from the highest in April down to the lowest in terms of the monthly inflation. So energy has been very volatile. Metals have come down from their highs as well, and they've also now down in 6.4% negative inflation, while agriculture and the green line and the brown line, which is the World Bank Agriculture Index, and the Food Price Index, which is FAO, are both 2.3 and 2.4%, showing you that agricultural prices are settling while we're starting to see some pullback and some volatility in the metals section. And therefore, we have an 8.7% decline in the World Bank Commodities Index. Now, in terms of year on year, you can see that prices are generally coming down. From May, where you saw energy prices up 100%, you saw commodity prices in general up 60%, and things were up 20%. Now you're starting to see that everything is now settling down into strongly negative territories. Everything is down from where it was last year. That is the strongest point that everyone has to pay attention to. Now, another part of this, my analysis of this is declining commodity prices. Yes, especially food prices, mean that domestic inflation can remain under control from the perspective of imported inflation. So the imported foods may not be a problem, except for those things that we're getting from South Africa, just for the meantime, because of the Rand movement. Now, for fixed income traders, they have to make this. This might actually give you a good idea that this maintains the case for a 10.4% projected inflation at the end of the year. Therefore, it's a good time to pile into these very high interest level bonds. So remember, you've got your bonds sitting at very high interest rates with the expectation that inflation seems to be capped around 10.4 and maybe 11 if there's any upside risk. But you've got these very high interest rates. So this is the time to pile in, because at the moment you're getting a little bit of a wider spread between inflation and the real interest rates that you're getting. Now, rising sugar prices is also a good signal for Zambia Sugar, which is the third largest LUSIC company, because rising sugar prices means that there's higher demand out there for sugar. Therefore, their sugar exports should bring in more dollars. And remember, sugar being the main thing for them, so therefore sugar exports should actually reflect in higher revenue, especially export revenue for them. Declining metals prices reflects weakness in proper copper and the industrial growth story. So in the short to medium term, copper will have an issue. Tomorrow I'm going to show you a full outlook on how the copper industry will probably benefit somewhere around 2025 going forward. That's where we're going to see a lot of the strength and the benefit of the copper industry. For now, it's a lot of investment just happening altogether. Now, that is the breakdown of the global inflation index. You can catch that anywhere from me. That's what we pump out in terms of data. But Vernon, let's get into our deep dive. The richest man in the world has finally entered Zambia. Well, I think he's now the richest again. I think that's the main thing. Elon Musk's Starlink has been granted a data license to operate a low-orbit satellite internet services in Zambia, and the expected issue date is around June 2023. Starlink's low-orbit satellite is aimed at Zambia. Is aimed at Zambia, getting internet to the most remote corners of Zambia, trying to get a fully functional 21st century e-government system and stimulation of development of innovative applications and services for our entrepreneurs. So we're trying to push for a digital Zambia. So the government, broad-based internet uptake, and also app creators. This should try and stimulate, because the ICT sector has been consistently one of the fastest growing sectors of the economy and has been a consistent contributor to economic growth. Now, obviously, Starlink services are projected to be somewhere around 800 to 1,000 kwacha per month, with 8,000 to 12,000 setup prices. But, Vernon, the mega whopping speed of 500 Mbps. Now, just regularly, most of these MiFi devices and things that we use are about 20. So we're talking about 25 times the internet speed that we'll be looking at. Now, obviously, for the regular person, this may not be much, but for the entrepreneur, for the people who are running stations, the people who are running digital businesses, the people who've got content divisions, that is some speed that you want to try and grapple onto. Now, remember that the thing about low-orbit satellite internet, right now when all the infrastructure has been knocked out of Ukraine, it's Elon Musk who's been providing internet into Ukraine. So if they can provide internet into war areas, then that already tells you how reliable this can be in a peaceful nation. Now, even things like satellite internet has been tested in countries like Rwanda, aimed at schools that are in the villages. Now, this also helps with things like ZeduPads, all sorts of things. These can help with things like that, getting that kind of education rolled out to as many people as possible, because the internet opens up people to information. So there is this horrible digital divide in Zambia that along the line of rail, the people are highly informed. Outside the line of rail, it's horrible. Now, the problem is obviously the prices are a bit high, but I'm thinking this, Vernon. Imagine if you are a owner of a block of flats, okay? If you're the owner of a block of flats, you can actually cover these installation costs and this cost and then resell. I'm sure that this is what you're going to find. You're going to find people reselling the internet to their tenants as part of their rent. So yes, I've already installed. We've got internet here, and you'll be able to utilize it. Here it is. Now you just pay an extra 200 kwacha. Then you just make like an extra profit on your rent because you're reselling internet to your tenants. That would actually be a smart play. You'd probably find someone like a lodge would probably use this much easier. Office blocks would probably use this much easier. Shared workspaces, if you're trying to utilize this. So you will find uptake mainly probably in the small business sector, or at least the small to medium business sector, or the rental real estate sector for people who've probably got about 4 to 8 flats, and they're trying to provide extra services to try and retain their tenants. Because these days I've started to see that a few more landlords are trying to do a few things. You are seeing some landlords even putting up solar panels in some areas to try and keep people, say, look, we are load shedding resistant, we're this resistant, to try and put more value to their rent. So this is probably a game that you'll probably find even in that market as well. Or I've just given someone an idea. Either way, Vernon, it works well. So that is one of the biggest news. Yesterday, we did see that JCTRs announced that living costs for a family in Lusaka dropped by 0.38% month on month and down by 2.31% year on year in the month of May 2023. Key drivers were decreases in the price of cooking oil. I think you saw yesterday, today, I've just shown you the global food prices, that cooking oil globally is down 8.7%, and fruits are also down as well. This is ex-meat and ex-sugar. This is driven by global food prices. Now, some things like penta and non-food items like charcoal are still on the rise, and this is correct. This also comes into the last inflation read that we saw. So we're pretty much seeing that prices of things or inflation levels are kind of leveling off. Yes, costs of things are elevated, but remember, people, inflation is the speed at which prices move, not the price movement. Okay, because we always get that argument, Vernon, with people. When you say inflation is coming down, yeah, but the prices are still up. What do you mean? It means the speed at which. So when you're driving and you're driving at 20 kilometers, your speed has come down, but that doesn't mean you started moving backwards. Okay, so just remember, inflation rate is the speed at which prices move. Sorry, Vernon, I don't know if you have a thought to give there.
I
Okay.
think we should proceed to the next item, the one that I'm really anticipating.
So we've also seen African news. In African news, we saw the Nigerian central bank has allowed the naira to weaken by 2% to a record low. Nigerian central bank auctioned the auction dollars at 640 naira a piece, a rate below the almost 30%. That's almost 30% weaker than the tightly controlled market. So remember, Nigeria has two markets. They've got the bank rate and they've got the parallel market. Currently, the bank rate's about 480. Parallel market is about 760. So they're trying to get things closer. Now, faced with heavy demand from industries and importers for currency right now, so they had to try and auction this off. Now, it adds to speculation that Nigeria is now planning on unifying the two markets. They don't want to have this parallel rate and this thing. They're trying to get rid of exchange controls. New President Bola Tinubu has told members of the government last week that he plans to get rid of these multiple exchange rates and just have one market-driven exchange rate. So he's already gotten rid of subsidies. He's now targeting the exchange rate. It looks like we're about to see some serious reforms happening in terms of Nigeria. Watch out for what is happening there and what impact it might probably have. In global news, this actually affects Zambia. US and China have only just started renewing diplomatic ties after years of Trump battling with them and also the Biden administration getting into competition with them. Tensions led to ruptures in communications, and therefore the trajectory of reproach remains uncertain. This is what the top White House official, Ken Campbell, actually told the top White House official for Asia, told the news. The U.S. is aimed at trying to create constructive diplomacy with Beijing while still remaining competitive. This is as plans that Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is planning on going to Beijing next week and could probably meet with President Xi Jinping. This is important for us because remember, the tension over the Zambian debt also has to do with geopolitical confrontations playing out in the middle of our debt. So if America and China start to make nice, that might actually help us come to a conclusion. Now, they're still going to remain competitive, but it means they're actually talking with one another, which means if they can start talking with one another, they can start dealing with Zambian debt in a more constructive manner, as opposed to not sending each other information, competing with one another, trying to point fingers at one another. We may find that our debt may get resolved. So this is good signs for us in terms of the debt talks. This is the stuff that moves the needle, not the promises we're going to keep getting. This is probably the most likely thing that can actually get there. It's just honesty. Look, there's very little we can do. We can't force people to give us a debt deal. We have to wait for them to figure it out. So, so at the end of the day, seeing this movement towards more diplomatic resolutions might actually start to play out in favor of Zambia. But remember, for trade and economics going forward, the competition of America and China will actually help, because you get the UK, who says they're going to put in $2 billion or as a $2 billion into renewable energy. Saudi Arabia puts in another $2 billion. And then again, you get the Chinese who decide we're going to top it off and put almost $3 billion. You see how you're getting a lot of FDI because of competition. And therefore, you're getting gigawatts of electricity added to your grid over the next 5 to 10 years because of this geo-economic competition. So there are benefits to the geo-economic competition. We don't want it to go away. We just want them to be able to talk at the table and sort out the debt. That's the main thing. Afterwards, let them get at each other's throats, because that works in our favor. Okay, hey man, I'm a businessman. I'm just trying to explain this to you. This is how it operates, man. This is how we operate. The other piece of news that we also saw yesterday was oil prices edged higher as Saudi cuts overpowered bearish backdrop of weak export data in China and rising fuel stocks in the US. Now, as things stand, the oil market is on the cusp of a massive shortfall. This is what PMV Oil, Stephen Burnock actually said. JP Morgan also noted that the forward curve of the country has climbed, indicating that refiners have not been increasing their processing rate. Instead, they've just been storing oil. So this is one of the problems they're facing. So there's no processing that's going to be improving. So they are seeing also prices expected to go up. Now, the United States Energy Information Administration on Tuesday said that crude oil production this year would rise faster and demand would increase at a slower rate than expected. So that's the other side of the argument. So on one side, we're seeing a potential shortfall. We're seeing that refiners may not be processing as much as they should be. But on the other side, supply is growing a bit faster. So we might see this balancing act. But on the edge of it, second half of the year is based on whether China will recover fully. Now, travel in China has recovered. Demand for jet fuel has gone up. That is one of the things that's driving a lot of this. But regular demand may be an issue. And remember, over the next 5 years, we are transitioning out of fuel cars. So the next 5 to 10 years, we're transitioning out of fuel cars and transitioning in to electric cars a lot more. So remember, that's the biggest threat to fuel demand. And that's why Saudi Arabia is willing to drive production down to try and get the prices up so that they can start investing in as many things as possible and offering people like Lionel Messi huge contracts to come there, while also offering Tiger Woods huge contracts. By the way, Messi has turned them down, and off he goes to the USA, to Major League Football. That's where he's planning on retiring, in Estacio, in the USA. Now, finally, in terms of cryptocurrency news, El Salvador's Bitcoin miner Volcano Energy launches with a $250 million investment. Now, it's a public-private partnership in El Salvador that pledges to pump $1 billion into creating Bitcoin mining farms. It has received its first $250 million kickstart to develop a 240 megawatt power station in wind and solar to be able to then to go into clean Bitcoin mining. Now, Volcano Energy also is aimed at trying to use the dormant volcanoes in El Salvador to try and pump into Bitcoin mining. Now, why is this important? Do you see what this does? This is actually a case which I've been making for Zambia, that if we are smart about this, the Bitcoin miners actually have access to capital to bring into Zambia and say, we will develop your renewable infrastructure if we can utilize it for crypto mining. You already have clean energy. You've got all these untapped water bodies, which you can now use to create water power stations. It's a good idea to get the crypto miners to actually then invest in all of this, because Bitcoin mining has had problems because the majority of mining is done in China, where they use coal. So therefore, the problem has been the energy footprint of it. Most of us who use green energy should be then marketing ourselves. Now, I've often said one of the best ways for Bitcoin, for things like Bitcoin or mining-based cryptocurrencies to pull African countries out of poverty is not trading Bitcoin, it's mining Bitcoin. It's utilizing our energy, our renewable energy, to actually mine. Now, remember, I say this because Africa is actually one of the continents with the biggest composition of renewable energy and has the most countries that utilize renewable. Now, unfortunately, just countries like South Africa who use coal, and countries like Nigeria and Egypt. But if you remove those three, you often find that most of Africa is now using renewable energy. It's really just those three that have been the biggest print on it. And therefore, we should be the most attractive. We've got young people who need to start using technology, who can become more confident with it. We now can start to get the Starlink satellite. This will be a good idea. Now, if you get these Starlink satellites to start coming in, providing good, reliable internet. So once you've got good, reliable internet, plus renewable energy, plus crypto mining, you can get tens of thousands of Zambian kids actually mining this stuff. Okay, as long as you can get the devices in cheaper, because the only barrier now is a device. Now, a crypto mining device is a little bit expensive. Those things can range from anywhere from about 20,000 to 200,000. It's the price of a car. However, instead of a car which guzzles fuel, this thing actually makes money. Okay, that's the difference. That's the difference. So the only thing I think you always have to work out with crypto mining is the price of Bitcoin versus the cost of your electricity. So what a lot of these guys are trying to do in the crypto space is build out solar infrastructure and wind infrastructure, because the renewables now become a little bit more cheaper to be able to generate, because now it just generates the electricity for mining as opposed to relying on the costs here. So if we played our cards a little bit smart, we could actually get this corner to actually pump in a lot more FDI into it. So that's just something to think about as a country. Now, it doesn't have to be the government who does it, people. We are a private sector. We're people. We're going to come up with things. Watch as I keep saying this. I'm going to repeat it. And if you choose not to listen to me, walala, wasala. Just remember those words. If you're caught napping, that's your issue. Now, interesting. I don't know what your thoughts are, Vernon, before we get into it. I know cryptocurrency's got a bad name, but when you think about the mining industry, it actually might be one of the most beneficial things if you look at it less for trading and more for mining and start to look at how to enable mining. I don't know if you got any thoughts before we move on to our chart of the day.
I think it's not really a bad idea, owing to where we're coming from with regards to the high unemployment rate in the country. With not just the young people, earlier mentioned, into perspective brought was the fact that there's also very little education with our folks, older folks, and that I feel this is a whole abstract of employment, income generation, streams as well for people. If they can learn how to mine as well, see how they can utilize that, I feel that also build up more, income opportunities for a whole lot of a demographic, unlike what we have currently on the table. It's okay, but I think if we can have more opportunities, then we have more people employed, we have more people having more money, and the government at the end of the day should also be having more taxes. If well regulated. And I think also the aspect that I've constantly had and noticed with the mining of mineral resources is regulation has been there, but there are quite a number of rigidities that
Vernon,
still
this is not physical mining. It's not physical mining.
yeah.
It's Bitcoin mining.
Well, we've seen regulators coming back and forth on that one, but mineral resources in Zambia, regulation hasn't been really very serious. I don't know how they're doing it, but it hasn't seemed like it hasn't been very serious. So if we can have serious regulations where the government can be able to pinch out whatever they can, with regards to revenue, and people also are able to have a source of income and be able to fend for themselves from this particular stream, I think it would be a great idea. So long as we invest time to teach people, on how to leverage from these kind of opportunities, I think it'll be great for people. Knowing that we have the high employment in the country, people who are interested to alleviate themselves from whatever situations, they could use this as an opportunity to get themselves out of it. And the government, I know how mining Bitcoin and whatnot can be very risky according to what we have so far, online and whatnot. But if well regulated and people understand this particular sector, I think it would be great. I mean, you always have scammers, you always have people trying to get free money out of you, but once you are educated, as volatile as stocks can be, but if you're educated, you're able to manage and grow your knowledge. I think the same also could be applied, and it could be more of a win-win situation for everyone.
So I think one of the key points I wanted to just make in here was when they're dealing with crypto mining, really all it is computing power. All you're doing is you're taking a computer, connecting it to a network, joining a mining pool, because the key is not for people to become individual miners. That's very expensive, but to give people the capabilities of joining mining pools from other countries. Now, the biggest mining pools were developed in China, F2 pool and Ant pool. So basically, a lot of people join their computers together, solve an equation. So your computer is then designated to solve an equation. Or this crypto mining computer is aimed at solving an equation. Once it solves that equation, it unlocks Bitcoins, okay, which are then issued onto the market. So that's how this Bitcoin system works. It unlocks more Bitcoins, which are issued onto the market. Now, what's happening is that Bitcoin has become one of the biggest energy consumers in the country, bigger than Switzerland, as the whole network. And the worry is that a lot of that was on fossil fuel and non-renewable energy. So the key, I think, everybody is trying to battle with is how do you get green mining going on, because it's getting a bad reputation. So this is why I'm saying the Chinese government has been trying to actually curb down its coal use and trying to go to more renewable. Now, the Chinese government has been upset with the fact that almost 60 to 75% of Bitcoin hashing rate was done in China. Okay, so this was the problem that we're doing. There was a lot of energy being consumed in China alone. Chinese mining pools had controlled more than 60% of the Bitcoin network collectively. And the Chinese government was upset with this. So they actually basically pushed out most of these people. So imagine that the majority of mining now has to happen outside of China. This presents an opportunity, okay, for the nations that do not use fossil fuels to step up and say, we would encourage our people to start engaging in this kind of mining activity. So on one side, everyone's looking at blockchains for how they can be used. I understand that's very important. The problem, the other side of the equation is, how can we become the suppliers of Bitcoin onto the market, of new Bitcoins onto the market? You don't have to think about the same thing with copper. You don't have to be the user of copper to mine it. Zambia has proven it. We mine it and then we just sell it to the people who need it. There are people who are buying up this currency, so it might be a good idea for us to look at the mining part of it. And that is what the drive has to be. And I think a question has actually been asked by Mr. Lamek Zimba, and I'll answer this quickly. He says, good morning. I guess Bitcoin mining can be driven by the private sector. Government has a lot of problems to solve. It's not a priority to them. The reason why I would say it could be, I'm not saying it should be a priority for government. I'm just talking about, we have a Ministry of Science and Technology who is trying to make a Bitcoin policy. The reason I'm telling you that it should be, because this actually solves unemployment. Now, Bitcoin may not be a priority for government, but unemployment is, specifically youth unemployment. That's a big problem for government, okay? And this is one of the ways you solve youth unemployment, because now you're getting all these people away from being in the streets with all this njala, all of them being upset, to now getting into actually doing something and learning to interact with technology. Because one thing crypto mining can also do is it makes Zambian young people confident with the utilization of technology, which can eventually spin out into not just crypto miners, but app developers. Because people become comfortable with using computers like that, also start exploring, start developing apps, start growing your economy. So the reality is the growth of the ICT sector can actually be triggered by utilizing Bitcoin mining here. So that's why I'm saying that if you can try and drive it, it's one of the things that, one, grows out the electricity infrastructure. That's a priority to government. And deals with youth unemployment. That's another priority to government. Okay? So yes, the government, may not be worried about Bitcoin mining as a thing, but the underlying things it can resolve, which is youth unemployment and electricity infrastructure, those things are actually problematic to the government. And yes, so it requires, this is why I said that turning Zambia into a new thing actually requires a bit of outside the box thinking as a country. Because I think we're always stuck on the very same paths of how to do things. We may need to start learning to think outside the box. This is what countries like Kenya and Rwanda are getting right. They're thinking outside the box on how to solve their economic issues. And that's why they're starting to grow the way they are. They're actually thinking in different ways. They're trying to utilize different systems. They're leveraging on different technology, tapping into different relationships. They're thinking in a very innovative way about their growth trajectory, and it's reflecting in the growth of East Africa. Now, we're trying to use archaic systems on how to solve problems in the new age world. This is where the problem starts to come. Now, I'm not saying it'll overnight solve everything, but it will start to deal with the pressure that the government is dealing with from young voices on the streets constantly upset. Now, I'm not saying it's going to deal with the lowest rungs of the economy because it requires computer literacy, which requires some form of literacy on its own. It requires access to laptops and all sorts of things. But you already have graduates who are unemployed, who are earning very little, and you have a very concentrated economy. Plus, this can also affect decentralization. If you try and look at it this way, there's multiple benefits that this actually has. But I'm just giving you the model of how much money El Salvador managed to raise on one round of this with a plan of getting $1 billion of capital into it. Think about what it'll do going forward. That's just a thought for everybody to think about, but it's a way of thinking about it going forward. Now, let's get back into our main topics of discussion today. Here's the chart of the day, Vernon. This is a trend that's actually been going on for our brothers in the Salaula market. It's actually showing you that over the last 4 years, we've actually been seeing the percentage revenue of secondhand clothing that's actually gone up from 4.6% to 6.1% of the global apparel industry as online trading also goes up. So there seems to be a convergence, Vernon, between online and secondhand. So you're actually seeing here that it's projected that secondhand clothing will make up 7% of the trade of clothing, while 43% by 2025 will be done online. So the convergence between online and secondhand, this is just to show you that there does seem to be a trend happening in the rise of secondhand and the rise of online for the apparel industry. For those of you who are apparel entrepreneurs, this is a chart to keep an eye on. Now, let's get into our topic of discussion today, Vernon. That is the art of persuasion. So I've been talking about the three sources of value, okay? That if you want to make money, and especially running a business, it is about solving a problem, selling a product, and serving a person, okay? Or I've often said a business is a problem solved with a product developed with a process. Okay, so I want you to remember that. It's a problem solved with a product developed with a process. That's all a business is. But the flow of activity is to solve a problem, sell a product, and serve a person. Now, last time we've been going through the problem solution matrix, and last week we touched into Alex Catoni's six points of making a good sales pitch. Today, I want to talk about the 6 principles of persuasion by Robert Cialdini, and I want to go through each of these in order of importance. Now, Robert Cialdini wrote a book called Influence: The Science of the Psychology of Persuasion. And the book is about 84 years old. And in that book, he writes about the principles that drive persuading somebody. And he really studied this. He goes into what is behind the psychology of persuasion. He goes through many studies. He goes through many things that people are going through at the moment. Now, the result of all of this, the result of Robert Cialdini's research comes down to a simple study which came down to 6 principles. Now, the 6 principles that we'll be looking at now, we'll be looking at in terms of the order. So the first principle, and these are the things that look at what is the likelihood of somebody who's ready to say yes to you. What do you have to build into an offer? What do you have to build into a sale? So when you're looking at your product, the question you always have to ask is, no matter how good your product is, the sale will never get this. The sale is still important. Whether you've got a wonderful product, whether you've got the best solution in the world, if you can't sell it, it means nothing. Okay? So let's get down to the 6 principles that get a person persuaded by your sales pitch, because that's how you compete with people. It is not the people who may have the best product, it's the people who have the most persuasive messaging. So for those of you who are trying to run your businesses, you're looking at persuasive messaging. So number 1, the single most, and in fact, I'm going to start from number 6. The least out of the 6, the least most important principle is the fear of losing out. Okay, so the fear of losing out, Vernon, is the fear that the thing that you are selling to me is going to run out of stock. Okay, so it's running out. So this is why we tell people, hurry before stocks conclude, or your time is running out. If you give someone the idea that something is running out and something is running scarce, they rush to buy it now. Now, he gave the example of British Airlines, who had a flight that they wanted to cancel. Now, nobody was on that flight. And what they ended up doing eventually was that they eventually said, we're going to cut this flight. This will be the last one. They saw sales rocket up because it was now scarce. Now, I always tell people, what's more expensive, diamonds or water? Diamonds are more expensive than water. And why is that? Because diamonds are scarce. Water is what keeps you alive. Water is more useful than diamonds. Diamond may keep a woman for a bit of time. If you're trying to marry her, that's a different story of use. But water is generally more useful. You're not going to die from running out of diamonds, but you will die from running out of water. But water is less valuable because it's abundant. So by purporting your product to be scarce, it increases the value of the product. The next thing that you're looking at is also trust. Somebody feels like they can trust you. That is called authority. So when somebody feels comfortable with the idea that they can trust you, then they're willing to buy from you. Okay, so that is another thing as well, because people are always looking to realize, but why should I buy from this person? Do they have more followers? Are they credible? Are they certified? Can a third party verify and authenticate this person? That is what gives you people the comfort in purchasing for you. The third, from the bottom there, is the debt of gratitude, reciprocity. You have given people value, and that's why they're willing to buy from you. So this is why you find a lot of people, even such as myself, will give out a lot of valuable content first. And when we give out that valuable content, people feel like, you know what? I think we owe it to these people to buy from their services. So one of the things that helps is by giving value first. You offer something of value first, which puts somebody in almost a debt of gratitude. So that is a valuable offer given out for free, puts somebody in an emotional debt of gratitude that then allows that person to feel that they need to say yes to your next offer. The third one is a fear of missing out, popularity. Sorry about that. The fear of missing out, which is popularity. So you're looking at the fact that something is rising in popularity, and people often fear not participating in it. So they don't want to lose out or miss out on something. So they don't want to lose out if something is scarce, but they don't want to miss out on something that everyone else is benefiting from. So when you can show rising numbers, X amount of people have, this amount of people have, join this many people. When people see social proof of your product, they start to then require that, oh, I don't want to miss out on that benefit. That's how, this is how even things like Ponzi schemes do very well at getting people. They show you the few people who've managed to get money out of there. The social proof gets into your head. The final one, the second last one, Vernon, is likability. People buy from people who they like. And people like people who are just like them, who are cooperative. So it's common, who are common ground to them, who are cooperative or complementary. If you are like me, if you help me, or if you say nice things about me, I will like you. And that is one of the reasons why even Dale Carnegie talks about throw out compliments, be complimentary to people. You are more likely to have influence over them. And finally, Vernon, the number one way and the top reason why people say yes is consistency. Either they've expressed interest in something smaller. This is why you give people free trials. This is why you tell them to sign up to this list. This is how you get them to click on this. If somebody has made a micro commitment to something, then they're more likely to say yes to it. So whenever you're making sales offers to any product, when you're running a business, people, your sales department is the most important. Whenever you're making sales offers, remember these 6 principles that will help you. You've got to make it scarce. You've got to show your authority. You've got to give them something of value first. You've got to show them social proof and rising in order for them to believe that it's worked for other people. Be likable to them and express and get them to express interest or make a micro commitment before making the full offer. If they can agree to something that is free or very low cost, Susan Mulongoti calls it the ladder of value. If you can start at the lowest end of the ladder of value, they are more likely to climb it. And that, Vernon, is a little bit on the sales part. We'll be talking about serving and growing later. To everybody who's been with us, we have one final comment. Sorry, no, we're running over. This is from Mudenda, who said, we have 21 million Bitcoins and 19 million have been mined so far. More Bitcoin mined leads to more difficult algorithms, aka mining solved. Yes, the hashing rates will increase. The halving happens. There's a whole system to this, but Bitcoin mining is still profitable. That is the reason why the Chinese are doing it. And yes, the 2 million Bitcoins are only going to finish being mined by the year 21,000. And as the Bitcoins become more difficult to mine and the hash rates go up, the price of Bitcoin also goes up as well. That's what happened in 2020 when the halving happened. So remember that every 5 years, there's only half the amount of Bitcoin being issued onto the market each day. That's what makes it still profitable and manageable. And that, Vernon, is our closeout for the day.
Thank you so much. You have a good day.
Have a good day.